Good morning, first graders.
Good morning, Miss Hubela.
It's beautiful to see you today.
If you look at the latest data from the National Assessment of Educational Progress project, the NAEP project, if you look at the reading scores of 4th and 8th graders, only about 30%, 35% of our students in our country are proficient or above in reading. And the data is even worse for our students of color. For Hispanic American and African American, those proficiency rates drop down to 15, 16, 17% according to the latest 2007 NAEP data. We need to do something about that, and RTI is one thing that we can do.
Response to Intervention, or RTI, is a systematic approach to screening all students, providing instruction interventions, frequent monitoring of student progress, and using data to improve instructional decision-making. Response to Intervention can be used to ensure that all students are receiving the instruction they need, and is designed to provide early, effective help for students who are having difficulty learning and to prevent academic failure.
RTI is one of the best and strongest and most important educational practices that has come our way. It helps us to identify how kids are doing in education. It helps us to know whether or not they are learning and if they're learning on track to achieve academic benchmarks and academic standards.
RTI comes out of the work of Standino 20 years ago, where they decided that what if we could work with children before they fail, before they have problems, and then provide instruction that is fit for that child, and then monitor the progress on that instruction. If the instruction is working, then we keep doing it. If it's not working, then we change that instruction.
RTI is a multi-tiered approach to addressing the needs of all students. During core instruction, or Tier 1, students receive high-quality research-based instruction that addresses the 5 essential components of reading instruction, including phonemic awareness, phonics, fluency, vocabulary, and comprehension. In Tier 2, students who are not meeting standards receive daily small group explicit instructions matched to their instructional needs. Students not responding to these targeted interventions receive more intensive small group instruction in Tier 3.
Tier 1 is core instruction. It's good instruction that all students need and should have available to them. But for those students that are not at benchmark or not at grade level or not meeting standards, we need some more intensive interventions. And that's where Tier 2 and Tier 3 of RTI come in. And what we do is more small group instruction for those students. We use evidence-based reading instructional strategies. We monitor student progress on a frequent basis to see if students are growing or not growing, and we meet on a regular basis to talk about those students.
The major components of RTI are universal screening, core instruction Tier 1, targeted interventions Tiers 2 and 3, progress monitoring, data meetings, and fidelity checks. These essential elements are joined together by a common set of achievement indicators used for decision-making. Curriculum-based measurement procedures provide the student data necessary for RTI implementation.
A good metaphor is something like a thermometer with which we take body temperature. I imagine that if teachers had something like a thermometer, they could easily, frequently, repeatedly measure students' performance in basic skills and use that information as a basis for making judgments about their success. Thanks to the good work of a lot of different people, we developed a set of measures that teachers could use to evaluate growth in reading, writing, and eventually arithmetic.
We adopted those measures in the early 1980s and used those curriculum-based measures to measure student growth in reading and in other academic areas.
According to national assessment standards, it is important that achievement indicators are empirically validated.
The data has to be accurate, the data has to be reliable or consistent, and it has to be valid. Okay, you can begin whenever you are ready. Go ahead.
The best student.
The CBM measures, which are documented to be valid and reliable, have also been shown, through research, to predict reading proficiency on state accountability tests.
One thing we know through formative assessment or progress monitoring is that students will show greater academic gains when we use a formative assessment approach. So as we're assessing the child while we intervene and then using the assessment results, the formative assessment results, to tweak or to change our interventions to better address the child's needs, we see greater gains in the long run.
Universal screening is a really important part of RTI because every student gets screened based on the objective data, like a benchmark. And so it really reduces the potential bias in the process of identifying at-risk students.
We do fall, winter, and spring screenings of all the students in our K-5 school. In doing so, we identify children who are not performing up to expectations in reading. After we've identified these students, we then group them according to instructional needs and plan, based upon the data, what our instructional strategies and materials should be.
CBM are a curriculum-based measure. Those are used, their passages given, and the kids read for 1 minute, recalculate the number of words read correctly and their errors. We give them 3 CBM passages, and after each passage they have some comprehension questions.
Data from these evaluations are used to place the students in Tier 1, Tier 2, or Tier 3. Green represents students at grade level. Yellow is for students slightly below grade level, and students in the red are at risk.
We then look at the data to see their area of need, and then we go ahead and look at the interventions and the materials we have at school and assign them accordingly.
Someone willing to read standard number 1, Tracy?
All students receive core instruction at their grade level. Then once the data is reviewed, students who are in Tier 2 and Tier 3 receive instruction based upon those needs.
Well, you want to make sure when you're implementing any sort of core, it covers the 5 areas identified by the National Reading Panel. So phonemic awareness, phonics, fluency, vocabulary, and text comprehension. All of those areas need to be covered in depth in a literacy program.
Since we've followed this response to intervention model, we seem to be zeroing in more on individual performance. So we look at the overall class, and hopefully our professional development is there to improve our core class instruction. But then we look at the children that aren't getting enough through the core class instruction and need some extra support. And so looking at the data helps us to identify that.
Tier 2 and 3 interventions are delivered in small groups on a daily basis to students not responding to Tier 1 instruction. Instruction in these tiers is explicit and includes systematic use of modeling practice and corrective feedback.
We're able to give them more added instruction or more direct instruction. Some students are going to require more practice with decoding. Some students will also require more practice with fluency so that the comprehension can become stronger.
When you're implementing Tier 2 interventions, you want to make sure that you have a program in place that's giving the student more than what they currently have in the core, some sort of supplemental instruction. It might be similar to what the core is, but it's going to be more intense. It'll probably be an intervention delivered in a small group with students with similar needs. It's likely that the intervention will be more intense, so probably more time than what you would receive in the core. It should be opportunity for lots of practice and repetition of skill in your intervention group.
Well, why don't we start with Antoine? You can see his graph.
By graphing the student data, we can look at growth and we can look at whether students are responding to interventions or not responding. And of course, in those cases where students are not responding, we want to make sure that we're going to adjust or modify our instruction so that we can get better interventions to that student.
We do it weekly for students in Tier 2 and Tier 3, and they're given by their leveled reading teacher, the teacher that works with them in the area of reading, so that they're aware of the mistakes or what they need to work on. And then they are graphed weekly. And then those graphs are used in our monthly data meetings to decide, is the student making progress? Are they plateauing?
When the teachers look at that progress monitoring data, they have a very clear understanding of, is the child progressing with the present instruction? Is the child not progressing? And then based on that data, they can make certain modifications either to their instruction or to the instruction that the child receives in a form of an intervention. And it can be done in a timely and quick manner so that groups are truly flexible and not just flexible in name, but that it's done quickly. So there's no time lost in the child's education. We have the children for such a short time. We really do need to have a sense of urgency with this, and this allows that to happen.
The progress monitoring meetings are wonderful. That is a time when we can talk all together, all of the teachers, because we usually can't always get together to talk about the children. So monthly, we sit down, we talk about their needs in our reading groups, and decide who needs to move up, who's not being challenged.
I like the student data meetings for various reasons. One is I get a perception from my colleagues as to what they're doing with their groups and how my kids are doing for them. Because when the kids are back in my classroom, I've got the 20 plus, 23, 24 kids. I can't get to all of them like we do in the smaller group settings. And so it gives me a good perspective from their vantage point that correlates with what I know or maybe don't know with those students.
The meetings are great. It's a great time to collaborate with their teammates. It's a great time to see that their teachers are doing great and they feel good about it. And when they're not, they make themselves realize by looking at the charts that they aren't succeeding, that they need to do something different to help these students.
We get a substitute in our room so that we feel like our kids are taken care of, and we can relax and just discuss our children and their needs.
She's moved on to the yellow, so she's been making some progress, so we can go on to her weekly monitoring.
Watching the teachers review the data, listening to some of the discussions that they have about kids, and even hearing not even just the grade level teachers who are outstanding, but also the administrators, the social workers, the reading specialists, the Title I folks, the special ed folks, all working together to ensure that that child is getting what he or she needs.
We also do fidelity checks. I'll go out every 6 to 8 weeks and watch them or observe them teach their intervention, just to make sure that when we say a child is plateauing or not making progress, is it because the intervention isn't working or is it because the intervention is being delivered incorrectly? So we do a fidelity check.
We risk the possibility that without a careful consideration of what we're doing and how we're doing it, that we'll implement procedures that really don't work very well and very consistently, and then there will be a reaction to the implementation of those procedures, and people will say, well, we tried that and it didn't work.
One of the things that we've seen in schools where we're running our RTI projects is we're seeing a decrease in the number of children who are qualifying for special education services. I think what's happening is we're addressing the needs earlier and we're remediating the academic delays earlier, so they don't need the special education services.
I like the RTI model as a special education teacher because I know that students have had really good intervention before they're referred for evaluation. So I think it's good for students in many ways because the earlier we catch them and the earlier we intervene, the less intensive instruction they'll need later on.
Special education is needed. It's absolutely essential. But some children were getting into special education and they didn't need it. And this system is beginning to have an impact on that. And I think that that is outstanding.
And we use those scores, and through that, the teachers have been able to collaborate much more and learn from each other in the differentiation that they use in their classrooms for these students who are struggling. So a lot of the collaboration has helped our teachers realize that they need to do more than just teach to the grade level.
So, we start having these discussions in the data meetings, talking about interventions, but it carries over into the teachers' planning, the conversations they're having with other teachers, and the support teachers, whether it's the special ed teacher or a Title I teacher. What are the strategies? What can we do? What kind of groupings can we work with? It carries over into the hallways. So the discussions become about children and teaching, and it's powerful. It changes the whole climate of the building.
To facilitate RTI within a district, there really are a number of steps that the district needs to take. I believe that starting with a district-wide implementation team is step number one. RTI is not just special ed, it's not just general ed, it's everyone working on behalf of students.
There have been a number of benefits that were unanticipated through participation in this RTI project. One of them is our instructional time engages students more because we are more planful, more focused about what needs to be taught and how. And so therefore students are more engaged in learning. We've noticed that our behavioral referrals and time off task have decreased greatly. Teachers have become more collegial. There's been a sense of discussion in the teacher's lounge is about instruction. People are excited about learning as adults.
As a mom, as a school board member, and as somebody who has done research for years, to me there's no better system that I've seen before that has led to the kind of results that we're seeing now for kids every day.
I couldn't imagine a more satisfying career than the one that I've had, to see the extensive application and use of the work that we've done over the last 35 years or so. It's tremendously satisfying.
One of the teachers said to me the other day, he said, you know, I thought I was an okay teacher, and having been through this whole process of learning more about instruction, understanding the developmental aspects of reading, knowing what to do because I have good assessment data, he said, I feel like a great teacher. And that feels good for a principal to hear.